So hello and welcome to Morbid Mondays. In this video we're going to be talking about oh no. So in my last video we talked about something really fun and interesting, just a cute little story, and that video was pretty lighthearted. Not this video though. In this video we're going to be talking about something known as the Brazilian Holocaust. So disclaimer. If you don't feel like you want to watch a video about Brazilian Holocaust, don't. You can watch something lighthearted. In my last video it was pretty lighthearted. Go watch that. Don't watch this video. And for people who want to watch this video anyways, you have been warned. Also, apologies to the Brazilian people for butchering any of the words. So, yeah. So let's jump into it. I first heard about the Brazilian Holocaust when I was doing research about that TikTok bone collector guy. When I was doing research for that video, I accidentally stumbled upon a video which offhandedly mentioned the existence of the Brazilian Holocaust. The first time that I heard about this particular hospital, I was sort of shocked that I hadn't heard about this before, because just listening to some of the details, it made me feel like, oh, well, this is something that we all should know about. But at the same time, I was like, maybe the reason that we haven't heard about it is because maybe it wasn't a big deal. I know how horrible this sounds, I know, but I legitimately thought that maybe it was not a big deal and that's why we haven't heard about it. But because if it was a big deal, we would have heard about it, right? No, not exactly, you see. I quickly learned that the reason why we haven't heard about it is not because it wasn't horrific or important to the history of Brazil, but because if a tragedy doesn't occur in the developed world, basically we don't really care about it. It's really that simple. If it didn't happen in the developed world, most people don't care about it. Another reason why you may not have heard about this particular case is because of the language barrier. I found a lot of great Brazilian YouTubers talking about this particular situation, but the thing is, they don't speak in English. A lot of books about this particular case are not translated in English. Now, let me get this straight. It's not like there are no resources available. There are a lot of great articles about this particular case in English, okay? However, the majority of the resources are not in English. So that's another reason why you may have not heard about it. But regardless of that, we're going to talk about it anyways. So yeah, let's talk about it. Museu da Loucura, Museum of Madness, formerly known as the Hospital Colonia, was a psychiatric hospital founded in 1903. The institution was located in the Brazilian city of Barbacena. From its foundation to 1980, Colonia was a center of genocide. There have been official reports which estimates that over 60,000 people died in those wards due to medical malpractice and torture over the years. There was even a quote by an Italian psychiatrist, Franco Basaglia, who compared this place to a Nazi concentration camp. After his visit to Hospital Colonia of Barbacena, Franco Basaglia said, "I have been today in a Nazi concentration camp. In no place on earth I have witnessed such a tragedy." There have even been books written about this particular case. In 2013, there was a Brazilian journalist, Danielia Arbex, who released an investigative book called The Brazilian Holocaust, telling the stories of survivors and victims. This is a must-read. If you know Portuguese, go read this book. Hospital Colonia, colony in Brazilian Portuguese, was founded in 1903. Hospital Colonia was one of the largest psychiatric hospitals in Brazil at the time. It housed over 5,000 patients. The only problem with that was the fact that Colonia had the capacity to only give shelter to 200 patients. The hospitalizations in the psychiatric hospitals of Minas were more than double the number recommended by the World Health Organization. That is 3 hospitalizations for every 1,000 inhabitants. In 1930, the overpopulation of the unit started to write a tale of extermination. 30 years later, there were 5,000 patients in a place initially designed for 200. The Hospital Colonia was a profitable machine of killing the insane that would get its profit when the new patients arrived, because the psychiatric hospitals would receive a daily rate for each hospitalized patient. That made the number of beds in such hospitals rise from 14,000 at the beginning of the military dictatorship in Brazil to around 70,000 in 1970. And because these psychiatric hospitals would receive a daily rate for each hospitalized patient, they were incentivized to hospitalize as many people as possible, which is the reason why over 70% of the patients in Hospital Colonia were never really diagnosed with any psychiatric disorders whatsoever. Not to imply that the 30% who were diagnosed deserved such treatment. I am not implying that. I'm just stating that over 70% were not diagnosed with any disorder whatsoever. They were just placed under permanent care because of their politics and social stigma. These patients were often alcoholics, epileptics, prostitutes, the gays, unwanted children, homeless people, women who lost virginity before marriage, political enemies, or simply people who were considered inadequate according to the social norms of the past century, like, shy men or women who wanted to be leaders and not just housewives. It is also notorious that a good portion of the population in Colonia was of the African ancestry, so it was just straight up racism. Also, a lot of rich people who lived in urbanized areas had a lot of power over who went to these institutions. A lot of people who were at Hospital Colonia were just there because they were being a nuisance. That explains why over 70% of the people in Hospital Colonia were never really diagnosed with any mental disorders whatsoever. Like I've said before, the book called The Brazilian Holocaust was never translated to English. And believe me, I tried to read the Portuguese version. I would take a page and go to Google Translate and try to read the translated version, but it would not work. So there were only a few quotes from the book that I could find, and I want to read them out to you. The socially disowned arrived in Barbacena from all corners of Brazil. They identically overcrowded the wagons of cargo when the Jewish people were taken during the Second World War. This was the origin of the expression mad train. The newcomers to the station of Colonia were taken to a triage sector. There, the newbies were separated by sex, age, and physical characteristics. They were also forced to hand in all of their belongings. Although they only had the bare minimum, they had to force to give in their shoes and clothes, a constraint that would lead to tears many women that had never faced the humiliation of being nude in public. All went through the collective bath, many times icy. The men were shaved similar to the war prisons. The estimate is that 70% of the patients did not suffer from any mental illnesses. They were only different or were a menace to the public order. For this reason, Colonia became the destiny of rivals, homosexuals, political activists, single mothers, alcoholics, beggars, black people, poor people, people with no documents, and all kinds of unwanted, including so-called the insane. The MAD train is the Brazilian version of the Holocaust railways. By 1960, Colonia was operating heavily over capacity and had over 5,000 patients. Most of them were always partially dressed. Some were fully naked and forced to work, including children, adults, and people with disabilities. At least 16 people perished every day due to sickness, malnutrition, heat shock due to exposure to low temperatures, and Scottish showers, electroconvulsive therapy, or just straight up murder. Beatings and rapes and violent treatment like electroshock therapy was common in Hospital Colonia. Sometimes the electric charge from the electroshock therapy was so strong that it would collapse the town's electric energy system. Furthermore, women who were raped in Hospital Colonia and got pregnant had their babies stolen away from them. And remember, there were also women there who lost virginity before marriage. Those women who got pregnant also had their babies stolen away from them. The profit didn't just came from the patients living there, but it also came when they died, with the commerce of corpses and dead bodies. The staff benefited from the remains of the dead body, as they were often smuggled to universities across the country. However, because they overflooded the market with these dead bodies, they soon lost their value. So later on, corpses in masses were simply dissolved in acid in the patio in front of the patients. And then the remains, the bones of those corpses were then sold. One of the things that I found out was this anecdote of a teacher where he was talking about how he was walking from his home to university when he noticed by the behavior of the students there that in front of the school there was something very wrong happening. From the inside of the building came a putrid odor, similar to the odor of 100 dead rats. When entering the internal patio, he saw the origin of the strong smell. Dozens of dead bodies, half naked, disposed in the most grotesque positions, occupied all the internal space of the college. Then a clerk of the medical college appeared and informed that the classes have been suspended and that a pickup truck had got there in the middle of the night, offering the bodies to the institution for around 1,000,000 cruzeros, somewhere around $364 today, and that if the university was not interested, there was already another buyer for the batch. The teacher was astonished to find out that the university bought corpses. He did not know that the Colonia Hospital had sold over 1,800 corpses to that institution between 1960 and 1980. And of course, none of the corpses had its commercialization authorized by the families. It was just something that the psychiatric hospital did. Here's another quote from the book. The men dressed in ragged uniforms had their heads shaved. Many, however, were nude. Luis Alfredo, a photographer of O Cruzeiro, saw one of them crouch and drink from the sewage that streamed on the patio. In the collective bathrooms, there were feces and urine instead of water. Still in the patio, he witnessed the moment when the flesh was cut on the ground. The smell was detestable, as well as the ambient, since the vultures peeked at every moment. In the kitchen, the daily rations were cooked in industrial cauldrons. Before entering the pavilions, the photographer saw a room closed only with a piece of wire. Easily entered, this place was used as a morgue, and he encountered 3 dead bodies in an advanced stage of putrefaction and dozens of coffins made of cheap wood. Inside the pavilions, children, adult, and naked women mingled, and they were exposed to sexual violence. Flies landed over the undead. The bad smell provoked nausea. Human misery was wide open in front of his camera. Now, I know that the grammar is not perfect, but this is the best I could find, okay? Arbex narrates the story of a 16-year-old boy who was hospitalized at the Hospital Colonia for his quote-unquote weirdness. Was it shyness or was it poverty? Could be a mixture of both of them. It is not known how many years he spent confined in that institution. Epileptic, hydrocephalic, physically disabled, or even ones that did not have any diagnosis, have lost their childhoods in Colonia Hospital, subjected to straitjackets, electroshock therapies, and lobotomies. As an example, Slavio Savat, a child photographed sleeping in the Hospital Colonia, his body was covered with flies and was mistaken by the photographer with a deceased person. He thought that the boy had died, but that wasn't true. This Brazilian Holocaust inspired an entire movement, the Brazilian anti-asylum movement, that demanded change in the hospital model and the violation of human rights. In 1980, due to the pressure in the mass media, the national anti-asylum movement managed to close down the institution and transfer the very few survivors and place them under proper care. So that's the story of the Brazilian Holocaust. Now the question is, who is to blame for all of this? When it comes to the Nazi Holocaust, we know who is to blame. It's Hitler. It's Hitler who's to blame. But in this case, who is to blame? Well, undoubtedly, the military dictatorship of Brazil at the time is to be blamed for this, 100%. And Brazil's military regime was, of course, politically aligned to the interests of the United States government. Of course. This was a way for the military dictatorship in Brazil to get rid of their political enemies, political activists, or, just undesirable people in general, like gay people. And think about it, it's really sophisticated. Like, if you want to do a genocide, you don't have to do it the way that the Nazis did it. You can do it this way instead. So that's the first thing, the military dictatorship, it is to blame. The second thing that's to blame is colonialism. I actually read a really fascinating thesis about this. Now, I don't know how much of that I believe it. The thing is, it's really complicated, and I have an attention span of a average TikTok, so yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's gonna take me a while to edit it. I don't know if it will actually go up on Monday or not, but I hope so. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like this video if you liked it. Comment your thoughts down below about what you think. Thank you to the members of the channel. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.